Pilots are some of the most recognisable professionals out there. Whether that's flying commercially, privately, or as part of the military, it takes a hell of a lot of training and dedication to become one. It's no surprise then that when a pilot recalls an encounter with an unidentified flying object, you can be pretty sure they are not messing around. So in closing off this series, Pilot Stories is episode 4 of when high-profile figures and credible individuals witness UFOs, or have a strong belief they have encountered alien life. As always, sit back and enjoy. Captain James Howard. On June 29, 1954, Captain James Howard was flying a commercial Boeing Stratocruiser from Idlewild, that is now JFK Airport, to Goose Bay, a Canadian Forces base in Labrador, on a bright sunny evening at 19,000 feet, when he spotted something along the left side of the plane. On closer look, it appeared to be 7 unidentified crafts, 1 being larger and 6 being smaller, with the big object seeming to change its shape in mid-air. He made the first officer, Lee Boyd, aware, who called Goose Airport to check if any aircraft was in the area, to which they told him there wasn't. As the main craft began to change shape and the smaller crafts moved around, Goose Airport decided to send a fighter jet to investigate. As the fighter reported he was approaching the plane, the objects, as witnessed for the last 80 miles by not only James and his companies, but also stewards, stewardesses and passengers, continued to change shape before they were no longer visible. By the time the fighter jet arrived, the Boeing was making its descent for Goose Airport. Upon landing and returning to their home destination in the UK, the pilots were interviewed by high trading Air Force intelligence officers, and although they wished they did but didn't have cameras on board, they were unable to take photographs, but James drew a variety of sketches to describe what they had seen. This was followed by a flurry of media reports trying to get interviews and find out more about this sighting, and when trying to explain what he and the others had seen, James ruled out many possible explanations, such as a mirage, an illusion, or a flock of birds, saying he was almost certain that the objects he saw were being intelligently handled. First Officer Lee Boyd, who was a former bomber leader, told a Daily Express reporter that he was willing to swear that what he saw was something solid, something maneuverable, and something that was being controlled intelligently. What makes this story so convincing is not only the number of witnesses, but the sheer experience of the pilots. Just think, Captain James Howard had over 7,500 flying miles recorded in his log at the time of the sighting, was an exceptional RAF pilot and former bomber squadron leader, who had flown over the Atlantic 265 times. He certainly doesn't seem the type to lie about an encounter, which makes you wonder, what exactly did they see? Was it something that could easily be misinterpreted? Or could it really have been of alien origin? What do you think? Andy Danziger. Andy Danziger was an incredibly experienced pilot. The fact he served as Barack Obama's personal pilot on Election Day in 2008 pretty much says it all. While he ran a daily news aviation column called This Is Your Captain Speaking, about all things aviation, and in 2008 he shared a personal encounter he had had with a UFO whilst flying from Kansas City to Waterloo in Iowa in 1989. He described that after takeoff, he and Bruce, the captain, spotted a huge disc that was behind a sheet of wispy clouds. As they spent the next half hour at cruising altitude, neither of them could take their eyes off the disc, trying to understand what it could be. He and the captain had been flying for years, and seen everything from unusual aeroplanes, blimps, hot air balloons, satellites and birds. But they had no idea what this thing was. As they took their eyes off it to begin the descent to Iowa, the disc started disappearing behind the wispy clouds before vanishing. But as soon as it was out of sight, a flash of light could be seen from within the clouds. Andy then said the object behind the cloud then turned into a giant ball of glowing red light, and the section of cloud the disc had disappeared behind was being stretched apart. Suddenly the cloud broke and everything disappeared. Andy said all of the wispy clouds that had been in the sky since takeoff vanished in a split second, and the craft was nowhere to be seen. They immediately called the Kansas City Center controllers to ask if anything was on their radar, but they said there was nothing apart from their plane. The operator then asked Andy and the captain if they wanted to report a UFO. They said yes, and were given a number to call once they touched down. It was a number for the National UFO Reporting Center, who Andy said he had no idea something like that even existed. After calling the number when landing and telling of their encounter, the person on the other end of the call said that the same thing had been reported by pilots countless times. Andy later said in an interview that many pilots have shared UFO stories with him, and that virtually all pilots believe in UFOs. UFOs simply being unidentified objects, but we can all assume most of them at least consider these could possibly be alien visitations. Captain Cookpur, William H. Fortenberry, and William B. Nash. On a clear July the 14th night in 1952, a Pan American World Airways DC-4 was on a routine flight from New York to Miami, carrying 10 passengers and a crew of 3. The plane was cruising at 8,000 feet over Chesapeake Bay in Virginia, when suddenly a red light appeared in the distance, and seemed to be moving towards the aircraft at tremendous speed. Nash described them as looking like 6 glowing hot coals, and that their shape was clearly circular. The lead craft was flying lower than the other 5, with each of the others following slightly higher in a tight formation. Apparently, as the objects got nearer, the lead objects appeared to slow slightly, and the 2 behind almost overran it before adjusting their speed and reforming. Nash estimated the size of each craft to be slightly larger than the wingspan of his plane. When the crafts were almost directly under the DC-4, they all flipped and their unlit edges were exposed. Nash estimated these edges were about 15 feet thick, and they looked like huge coins. Once all the crafts were in the same flipped position, the last 5 went past the lead craft, and the formation was now the other way round. Then, with a sharp and abrupt move, they all flipped back in unison to their original flat disc position, and the 6 were joined by another 2 that appeared to dart out from underneath the aircraft. Now, with all 8 together, the lights started to blink on and off, and then the craft sped off, climbing higher and higher before finally disappearing from view. The 2 crew went into the compartment where the captain was, then asked the passengers if they had seen anything, but most of them were sleeping. The pilots called the Norfolk radio and asked for this message to be forwarded on to the military. 2 pilots of this flight observed 8 unidentified objects. Vicinity Langley Field, estimated speed in excess of 1,000 miles per hour, altitude estimate 2,000 feet. Before landing, Nash and Fortenberry sat down and did some calculations, figuring out that the crafts had made a 150-degree change of course, and must have been travelling at approximately 12,000 miles an hour. If their calculations were correct, then it would be impossible that any human or metal could withstand the heat generated by friction of going that fast, without becoming a mangled mess. The pair were interrogated by the Air Force when they landed, and told that their experience was not unique. When asked what it felt like to have seen flying saucers, Nash answered, "When you see saucers from the angle and nearness that we did, you feel humbled and deflated, that we and our modern aeroplane was so far outclassed by somebody and something else that it wasn't at all funny." Alderney UFO sighting. On April 23, 2007, Captain Ray Boyer took off from Southampton Airport in southern England to take passengers on the 45-minute journey to the Channel Islands of Alderney. This was a trip Bauer had completed almost daily for the past 8 years. The weather was fine and visibility was good, and at the height of 4,000 feet, the aircraft was put on autopilot. But then, whilst cruising about 10 miles south of the Isle of Wight, Bauer noticed what appeared to be a brilliant yellow light. At first, he thought it was another aircraft, but after contacting Jersey Air Traffic Control, they confirmed there was no traffic in that location. As the plane got nearer to the object, a second identical shape appeared in the background. Boyer described both objects as being like flattened discs, with a dark area to the right of them. The yellow light was emitting from within the crafts, and he estimated the objects were about a mile across. As his plane approached them, they appeared larger and larger, and were stationary and in view for around 15 minutes. Fortunately, Bauer was able to start his descent and land the aircraft safely at Alderney. However, it was not just Bauer who witnessed the UFOs. His passengers also saw the two objects, as did the pilots of another aircraft 25 miles further south. Some radars also registered the presence of the two objects. After landing, Bauer reported the incident to the relevant authorities, and investigations began. He has since openly talked about the incident, and has commented on the differences in reporting of UFO sightings in the UK compared to the United States and the rest of the world, who don't readily admit to investigating these sightings, and that sometimes pressure is applied to pilots not to discuss incidents. Bauer urges fellow aircrews to report unusual sightings as soon as possible, and to stand up and be counted so broader investigations can be made into these phenomena. Similarly to what Nash and Fortenberry said, Bauer commented on what a fantastic bit of equipment the objects were, and that in his opinion, they were not from around here. Swiss Air Flight 127. At 4:50 PM on August 9th, 1997, a Swiss Air Boeing 747 took off from Philadelphia Airport en route to Boston Logan, were confronted with a cylindrical glowing white object, travelling at a very high speed heading directly towards them. They called the air traffic control, and here is a transcript of the communication the captain made with Boston Air Route Traffic Control Center. It explains exactly what they saw. Swiss Air Flight 127, ATC Swiss Air 127, Danbury Section 22, go ahead Swiss Air. Yes sir, I do not know what it was, but it just flew over, just a couple of 100 feet above us. I do not know if it was a rocket or whatever, but incredibly fast, opposite direction. ATC, in opposite direction. Swiss Air. Yes sir, and the time was 2107, 5:07 PM local time. It was too fast to be an aeroplane. ATC, okay thank you. To Houston 986, another aeroplane in the vicinity of Swiss Air 127. Did you see anything like a missile in your area, perhaps off to your right? H986, I'll take a good look, but if it was going that fast, I probably wouldn't get a chance. We just saw a Swiss Air go by a minute ago. Swiss Air 127, we had no warning, it was way too fast. The radio report was so intriguing that the Boston Flight Standards Office was informed while the aeroplane was still in the air, and an FFA officer, as well as the FBI and National Transportation Safety Board, was sent to meet the crew when they did land. The official explanation was that the object they had seen was a weather balloon. Bob Durant, a commercial airline pilot, later interviewed Captain Bobbitt, who said he was clearly dismayed by the balloon comment, as he thought it was a preposterous explanation. So there's 5 pilots who witnessed UFOs whilst flying, and who have never really been given an explanation that they are happy with. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you've loved the 4-part series because we have lots more series ideas in the works. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.